work week, and all I wanted was to reach my car in peace. My path to my battered 10-year-old Toyota was completely blocked by a brand-new candy apple red Porsche convertible that looked absurdly out of place against the dreary industrial backdrop. The driver door swung open to reveal my younger sister Tabitha, stepping out into the drizzle while modeling a head-to-toe Gucci outfit that undoubtedly cost more than the vehicle I drove. It was infuriating to witness this spectacle, because this woman had been unemployed for exactly 2 years and constantly complained to our parents about not being able to afford basic health insurance. She slowly removed her designer sunglasses to examine my appearance with a sneer of absolute contempt before delivering a line that made my blood boil in my veins. "Look at you, Valerie, working as a manager for 10 years, yet you still look like a miserable old woman. When will you ever learn to make smart money and be as successful as me?" I stood there silently questioning reality, because just last month she was begging our parents for gas money. Yet now she was lecturing me about success while leaning against a rental supercar. She did not wait for my response, but instead shoved a heavy gold-plated envelope into my chest, which turned out to be an invitation to her engagement gala. She warned me not to embarrass her with my cheap clothes before she got back into the Porsche and sped away, leaving me standing alone in the rain with a million questions. I knew immediately that her sudden fortune was built on lies, so I decided to uncover the truth. What I found was shocking enough to destroy her, and I waited for the perfect moment to reveal it all. If you were in this situation, what would you do? Comment how you would handle it and include the time and the city you're watching from, so I can see where you're tuning in from. The atmosphere inside the house in Beaverton that evening was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, which completely overpowered the comforting aroma of the pot roast my mother usually prepared for family gatherings. I walked into the living room to find my mother Beverly rushing around with anxious energy while Tabitha sat in the center of the plush beige sofa like a queen, holding court amidst a sea of glossy shopping bags. My father Clifford sat in his favorite recliner, leaning forward with a look of absolute fascination on his face as he listened to every word falling from her lips about her new life as a high-powered investor. Tabitha barely acknowledged my arrival, before reaching into a pristine orange bag to pull out a sleek black box that I immediately recognized as packaging from Hermes. She handed the box to Mom with a theatrical flourish, while claiming that a woman of such elegance deserved accessories that matched her timeless beauty. Mom opened the gift with trembling hands and gasped aloud when she revealed a leather handbag that cost more than what I earned in 3 months of managing logistics. The show continued when Tabitha turned her attention to Dad and presented him with a heavy green box containing a gold Rolex Submariner that gleamed under the living room lights. Dad stared at the watch with watery eyes because he had wanted a luxury timepiece his entire life, but never had the disposable income to justify such an extravagant purchase. I leaned in closer to inspect the watch, hoping to spot a sign that it was a counterfeit replica, but the craftsmanship looked terrifyingly authentic to my untrained eye. The conversation quickly shifted into a painful comparison of our lives as Mom placed the expensive bag on her lap and looked at me with a mixture of pity and disappointment. She asked why I was still driving that old car and wearing suits from department stores when my younger sister was clearly thriving in the new economy of digital assets. Dad chimed in to say that I needed to update my way of thinking because sticking to a traditional 9-to-5 job was a slave mindset that would never lead to true financial freedom. Tabitha seized the moment to lecture me about the changing world while she sipped on a glass of vintage wine that she must have brought with her to celebrate her own genius. She looked me dead in the eye and said that the era of working hard was over because smart people let their money work for them through decentralized finance. You really don't get it, do you, Valerie? You slave away for a whole month to get a paycheck that I can make in 5 minutes by simply clicking a button on my laptop because I understand how the market moves. I felt my patience snapping like a dry twig, so I decided to push back against this ridiculous narrative by asking for specific details about her revenue stream and tax filings. I asked her point blank if she had filed estimated taxes on these massive capital gains, or if she could show me the trading platform she was using to generate such consistent returns. The room went silent for a moment before my parents turned on me with expressions of genuine anger for daring to question their golden child who was finally successful. Mom slammed her hand down on the table and accused me of being bitter and jealous simply because my younger sister had surpassed me in every possible way, including financial independence. Dad shook his head while stroking his new watch and told me that my skepticism was exactly why I would always be stuck in middle management while Tabitha was destined for greatness. I tried to explain that I was asking these questions to protect them from potential legal issues, but Tabitha cut me off before I could finish my sentence about the IRS. Her phone began to ring with a loud and demanding tone that shattered the tension in the room and gave her the perfect escape route from my interrogation. She looked at the screen with feigned annoyance and announced that it was her business partner calling from New York regarding a crucial merger deal that could not wait until tomorrow. She stood up from the sofa and smoothed out her designer dress while apologizing to Mom and Dad for having to take the call during family time. It was a masterclass in manipulation because she knew exactly how to make herself look important while avoiding any real scrutiny about where the money actually came from. 2 days after that boastful dinner at the family home, my intuition screamed that something extremely dangerous was unfolding beneath the surface of my family's sudden fortune. I decided to leave my office at the logistics center 2 hours early to drive over to my parents' house in Beaverton without calling ahead because I needed to catch them off guard. The drive felt longer than usual as rain lashed against my windshield, while my mind replayed the way Tabitha had deflected every single question about her finances during our last meal. I pulled into the driveway to find Tabitha's rental Porsche already parked there, which confirmed my suspicion that she was making another move while she thought I was safely occupied at work. I unlocked the front door quietly and walked down the hallway toward the dining room where I found a scene that made my stomach drop. Tabitha was sitting between Mom and Dad at the dining table with a thick stack of legal documents spread out before them like a deck of cards. The papers bore the distinct blue logo of a major national bank, and Tabitha was pointing at various signature lines with an urgency that felt entirely wrong for a casual family visit. I stood in the shadows of the hallway listening as Tabitha explained in a sugary voice that these were just standard forms to appoint them as honorary board members of her new tech firm. She told them that by signing these papers, they would secure a lifetime pension that would pay out more than Dad's Social Security checks every single month. Mom looked at her with adoration while holding a pen hovering over the paper, ready to sign away her financial safety based on a fairy tale promise. I rushed forward into the room before the ink could hit the page, because I spotted a terrifying detail on the header of the document facing me upside down. Wait. Mom, Dad, do not sign anything until you actually read the fine print because that is not a board appointment. Why does that document have a stamp from the residential mortgage department if this is supposed to be a corporate position? The room froze instantly as Tabitha looked up with eyes that flashed with pure venom before she scrambled to gather the papers into a messy pile to hide the text. She snatched the document Dad was holding right out of his hands, as if she were protecting a state secret from a foreign spy. Her demeanor shifted from the sweet daughter to a vicious animal as she stood up to scream that I was trying to ruin the biggest opportunity of their lives. She accused me of being so jealous of her success that I would rather see our parents live in poverty than admit she was the superior sibling who actually knew how to take care of them. I looked to Mom for support, hoping she would see the logic in my warning, but she simply shook her head at me with a look of utter exhaustion. She reached out to pat Tabitha's hand to calm her down before turning her cold gaze toward me as if I were the intruder in their happy home. Valerie, you need to stop this paranoid behavior right now because it is tearing this family apart. Your sister is trying to show her gratitude for raising her, while you only look for problems, so please just leave us alone. I stood there in shock, as the weight of her words crushed any hope I had of reasoning with them in that moment. Dad did not say a word to me, but he reached across the table to take the pen back from Mom with a defiant motion that signaled his choice. He pulled the last page from the bottom of Tabitha's stack and signed his name with a heavy flourish while locking eyes with me. The look of disappointment on his face hurt more than any words could have, because it told me that he trusted a liar more than he trusted his own common sense. Tabitha smiled triumphantly as she stuffed the signed documents into her leather briefcase, and I realized with a sinking heart that I was completely alone in this fight to save them. 1 week later, while I was drowning in a mountain of shipping manifests and logistics reports, a phone call from Kendra changed everything. Kendra, my best friend of 15 years, and the head nurse at a local upscale retirement community, sounded uncharacteristically shaken as she asked me to meet her immediately at a quiet cafe near her clinic. She insisted that the matter was extremely sensitive and directly related to my family, which sent a fresh wave of anxiety through my chest as I grabbed my coat and rushed out the door. I found her sitting in a corner booth clutching a tablet to her chest with a grim expression that told me I was about to hear something that would shatter whatever was left of my peace. She did not waste time with small talk, but leaned across the table to reveal a dark reality that was far more sinister than I had ever imagined. Kendra revealed that a young woman had been frequenting her facility under the guise of doing charitable work and providing companionship to the elderly residents who were often lonely or suffering from early stages of dementia. This woman had spent months building trust with the most vulnerable people in the building before convincing at least 3 of them to withdraw their entire life savings. She had lured them into a phantom digital currency project by promising a 200% monthly return on investment that would supposedly fund a luxurious lifestyle for their remaining years. My heart hammered against my ribs as Kendra began to swipe through a series of high-resolution security photographs taken from the facility's common area over the past few weeks. Valerie, I checked the security camera footage after several families reported massive missing funds from their parents' accounts. This is exactly why I called you, because the woman in these videos is unmistakably your sister. Mrs. Smith, from room 302, just lost $50,000 to this scheme, and she is currently having a complete emotional breakdown because she has nothing left to her name. I stared at the screen with blurry eyes while my hands trembled so violently that I nearly dropped my coffee cup onto the table. The woman in the photos was indeed Tabitha, and what made the evidence even more damning was the specific designer outfit she was wearing in the most recent shots. It was the exact same head-to-toe Gucci ensemble she had worn to the dinner where she mocked me for my lack of success and gifted Mom that expensive handbag. I realized with sickening clarity that the luxury items she had used to buy our parents' affection were paid for by stealing the retirement funds of elderly people who could no longer defend themselves. Are you absolutely certain about the identity, Kendra? Because this is a serious criminal allegation that could ruin her life forever? Kendra looked at me with deep sympathy before playing a short video clip that showed Tabitha leaning in close to an elderly man while guiding his shaky hand to sign a document that looked terrifyingly similar to the ones I saw at the dining table in Beaverton. I finally began to connect the dots and realized that Tabitha was operating a textbook Ponzi scheme where she used stolen money from new victims to fund her lavish lifestyle and pay off just enough people to keep the lie alive. The most horrifying realization was that she was now expanding her predatory reach toward Mom and Dad because she needed a fresh infusion of cash to maintain her crumbling house of cards. She was not just a spoiled sibling with a spending habit, but a cold-blooded criminal who was cannibalizing her own family and community to maintain a fake image of success. I thanked Kendra for her bravery in coming to me and promised that I would handle the situation before anyone else got hurt by Tabitha's greed. There was no longer any room for doubt, so I plunged into a deep financial investigation and discovered a truth even more horrifying than the scam she was running on strangers. I realized that if Tabitha was brazen enough to steal from the elderly at the retirement home, she would certainly not hesitate to exploit the 2 people who trusted her most. I drove to my parents' house while they were out at a community luncheon and used my spare key to access the secondary mailbox located at the end of the driveway. I had noticed during my last visit that Tabitha was unusually protective of the mail, and now I knew exactly why she wanted to be the first one to reach it. Inside the small metal box, I found a stack of urgent envelopes from several major banks that Dad and Mom had never done business with in their entire lives. My heart sank as I saw the words "Past Due" and "Final Notice" stamped in aggressive red ink across the front of multiple statements addressed to Clifford and Beverly. I took the pile of documents back to my car and began to spread them out across the passenger seat to examine the staggering scale of the betrayal. I discovered that Tabitha had systematically used our parents' personal information, including their social security numbers and dates of birth, to open 5 different high-limit black credit cards. The records showed that these accounts had been opened over the last 18 months, right around the time Tabitha claimed her investment career had taken off. Every single luxury item I had seen lately, from the red Porsche rental to the gold Rolex and the designer Gucci outfits, had been charged to these cards. She had reached the maximum limit on every account, leaving Mom and Dad with a combined debt of nearly $80,000 that they didn't even know existed. She isn't just conning strangers, she is literally cannibalizing her own parents and turning them into massive debtors while they are still busy singing her praises. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I stared at a charge for a $3,000 dinner in downtown Portland that Tabitha had supposedly treated the family to celebrate her success. The reality was that Mom and Dad had unknowingly paid for their own celebration with high-interest credit they could never hope to pay back on their fixed income. I continued to dig through the documents until I found the most devastating piece of evidence yet, which was a confirmation of a home equity line of credit. Tabitha had successfully forged Dad's signature on those thick stacks of paperwork I had seen in the dining room only days prior. By doing so, she had effectively mortgaged their house for a huge lump sum of cash, which she was likely using to fund the deposit for her extravagant engagement gala. I sat in the silence of my car for a long time, trying to process the sheer coldness required to put one's own parents on the brink of homelessness for the sake of a fake image. Tabitha had manipulated their love and their pride to turn them into her personal bank accounts, and she was clearly planning to disappear into her new life with Preston before the bills came due. I spent the next hour using my phone to take high-resolution photographs of every single statement, every forged signature, and every late notice I had found. I made sure to capture the dates and the itemized lists of her spending sprees to ensure there would be no way for her to deny the truth. I carefully placed the original mail back into the box exactly as I had found it, because I did not want to alert her that I was onto her scheme just yet. These copies were the ammunition I needed for the final counterattack that would expose her in front of everyone she was trying to impress. I knew that if I confronted her now, she would only manipulate Mom and Dad into believing I was the villain, so I had to wait for a moment where she couldn't hide behind her lies. My sister had spent years perfecting her role as the successful entrepreneur, but I now held the evidence that proved she was nothing more than a common thief. 2 days before the engagement gala, I decided to return to that den of lies, one last time, not to save anyone, but to witness the sheer audacity of their betrayal. The air inside the house felt stifling as I stepped into the living room to find Preston, Tabitha's fiancé, sitting on the sofa with a look of naive bliss that made my stomach churn. He was a kind-hearted man with a successful career in software engineering, yet he sat there completely oblivious to the fact that he was about to marry a financial predator. Tabitha was leaning against him with an air of practiced elegance, her eyes gleaming with a predatory satisfaction that she no longer tried to hide from me. It was a surreal sight to see them discussing their future together, while the very foundation of my parents' lives was being systematically dismantled in the background. The centerpiece of this grotesque display was the massive diamond ring on Tabitha's finger, which caught the light with every calculated movement of her hand. I stared at the 3-carat stone and felt a cold fury rising within me because I knew for a fact that this $30,000 piece of jewelry had been purchased using the black credit card she opened in Dad's name. She was parading the evidence of her theft right in front of the victims, confident that her charms and their blind devotion would protect her from any scrutiny. Tabitha noticed me staring and purposefully extended her hand, tilting her wrist so the diamond would sparkle even more brilliantly against the backdrop of our parents' modest living room. "You should take a good look, Valerie, because this is a level of class that your entire life of working for a paycheck will never reach. Smart women do not need to sweat and toil just to own diamonds when they know how to navigate the world better than you." Preston gave a forced, awkward laugh and shifted uncomfortably, because even he seemed to sense the biting cruelty in her tone. He attempted to play the peacemaker by reaching out and offering me a seat, reminding me that the gala was only 48 hours away, and that they truly wanted me there to celebrate their union. He spoke about the beautiful future they were planning, mentioning how lucky he felt to be joining a family with such a rich heritage of success and legacy. It became clear to me in that moment that Tabitha had lied to him just as convincingly as she had lied to our parents, spinning a web of fiction where she was the brilliant heiress to a vast family estate. He was just another pawn in her game, a respectable shield that she could use to validate her fake identity while she drained everyone around her dry. I looked at the ring again and then directly into her eyes, which were filled with a smug sense of invincibility. I realized that she truly believed she had won, and that I was nothing more than a minor annoyance who was too weak to stop her ascent into high society. "It really is beautiful, Tabitha, and it fits your finger perfectly for now. I just hope you can hold on to it very tightly when the actual bill for all of this finally arrives at your door." Tabitha's smile faltered for a fraction of a second as she searched my face for any sign of a direct threat, but I kept my expression carefully neutral. Preston looked confused by my cryptic remark, but he simply nodded and smiled, likely assuming I was making a clumsy joke about the costs of the wedding ceremony. I did not stay a moment longer than necessary because the stench of her arrogance was becoming unbearable. I walked out of the house and stood in the driveway for a long time, the cold Portland wind biting at my skin as I gripped my car keys until my knuckles turned white. The temptation to call the police right then was overwhelming, but I knew that a simple arrest in a quiet suburb would not be enough to undo the damage she had caused. I wanted Tabitha to experience the full weight of her choices at the exact moment she felt most powerful, surrounded by the people she had lied to and the prestige she had stolen. I wanted her to be taken away in handcuffs while wearing her designer dress and her stolen diamond, with the flashbulbs of her fake world recording her absolute disgrace. My determination was now like tempered steel as I drove away, leaving behind the house that was no longer a home and preparing for the final act of this tragedy. I was no longer the jealous older sister they accused me of being. I was the person holding the truth that was about to burn her entire world to the ground. The engagement gala at the Nines Hotel was a spectacle of shimmering chandeliers that bathed the ballroom in an artificial golden glow, yet I walked into that room wearing the most basic outfit I owned. While the other women glided across the polished floors in designer gowns worth thousands of dollars, I stood near the entrance in a simple white button-down shirt and a pair of tailored black slacks. My presence was an intentional contrast to the hollow opulence surrounding me, and I could feel the judgmental stares of the guests as they whispered behind their champagne flutes. I did not mind their scorn because I knew that by the end of the evening, my plain clothes would be the least of the scandals discussed in this ballroom. I moved through the crowd with a quiet focus, carrying a slim laptop bag that contained the digital evidence required to dismantle the elaborate lie Tabitha had spent 2 years constructing. It did not take long for Tabitha to spot me, and she immediately veered away from a group of socialites to intercept me with a look of pure disgust. She was wearing a custom-made silk gown that probably cost as much as a compact car, her stolen diamond ring catching the light of the flashbulbs as she gestured wildly. She began to laugh loudly enough for the surrounding guests to stop their conversations, her voice dripping with the kind of performative cruelty she had used to keep me in my place. Preston stood a few feet behind her, looking deeply embarrassed by the scene, but he was still too mesmerized by her charm to intervene. "Good grief! Valerie, did you come here to wait tables or perhaps to clean the restrooms before the real guests arrive for the main course? I explicitly told you to wear something respectable so you wouldn't embarrass me, yet you show up looking like a total disgrace." I did not offer her the satisfaction of a response or an apology, nor did I flinch when several of her friends began to giggle at her sharp-tongued wit. I simply looked past her toward the stage where a large projector screen was currently displaying a slideshow of staged romantic photos of her and Preston. I waited for the master of ceremonies to announce the family toasts, and when the microphone became available, I walked up the stairs with a steady pace. Tabitha watched me with a smirk, likely assuming I was about to deliver a humble tribute to her greatness in front of her 150 guests. I reached the podium and calmly disconnected the media feed to plug in my own laptop, my hands moving with a cold precision. The ballroom fell into a curious silence as the romantic images disappeared, replaced by a series of high-resolution documents and security camera stills that made the room grow deathly cold. The first image was a grainy but unmistakable shot of Tabitha at the Sunshine Gardens retirement home, followed immediately by bank statements showing $50,000 being stolen from the elderly. Then I displayed the credit card statements I had found in our parents' mailbox, highlighting the $60,000 in debt that had been accrued in Clifford and Beverly's names. "Congratulations on your engagement, Tabitha. And please accept this as my official wedding gift to you, the absolute truth about where your success truly comes from. This entire lifestyle is a parasitic fraud built on the life savings of vulnerable seniors and a mountain of debt you have secretly piled onto the heads of our own parents." The silence that followed was so profound that you could hear the hum of the air conditioning as the guests stared at the screen in total disbelief. Preston walked toward the stage with a face as white as a sheet, his eyes darting between the forged signature on a home equity loan and the woman he thought he knew. He looked at the ring on her finger, then back at the screen showing the itemized receipt for that very ring, charged to his future father-in-law's Social Security number. Without saying a word, he reached out and grabbed Tabitha's hand, fumbling with the diamond for a few seconds before he wrenched it off her finger and threw it onto the marble floor. The massive double doors at the back of the ballroom were thrown open by a team of officers who marched through the sea of horrified socialites. They walked straight up to the stage where Tabitha stood trembling in her silk gown and ordered her to turn around. The sound of the handcuffs clicking into place echoed through the ballroom, a final and definitive end to the masquerade she had maintained so ruthlessly. Tabitha's screams turned into jagged sobs as she was led away in front of everyone. She had tried to impress, her designer heels clicking frantically on the floor as she was escorted out. 2 months have passed since that night of chaotic revelation at the hotel, and while the relentless Portland rain continues to fall, the sky in my mind feels much clearer now. The legal system moved with a swiftness that Tabitha certainly never anticipated when she was busy weaving her web of lies. She was recently sentenced to a lengthy prison term after being convicted of multiple counts of felony fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny against both the elderly and financial institutions. The designer gowns and the red Porsche have been replaced by a drab jumpsuit and a cold cell, a stark reality for someone who once believed she was too smart to be caught. Preston made a clean break from the situation almost immediately, and I heard he has since moved out of state to escape the shadow of the scandal that nearly ruined his professional reputation. The consequences for my parents, Clifford and Beverly, were equally devastating because the damage Tabitha had done to their finances was simply too extensive to repair. They officially lost the house in Beaverton last month after the bank foreclosed on the forged mortgage, forcing them to pack their few remaining belongings and move into a cramped, dilapidated apartment on the outskirts of the city. It is a far cry from the suburban comfort they spent 40 years building, yet they still seem to struggle with the reality of who their daughter truly is. They have tried calling me dozens of times, sobbing into the voicemail and begging me to use my savings to pay off their remaining debts and restore their credit. I chose to change my phone number and cut off all contact because I realized that helping them now would only continue the cycle of enabling that created this monster in the first place. I spent my life being the reliable, hard-working daughter only to be treated like an outcast, and I finally chose to prioritize my own sanity over their misplaced loyalty. Now I sit in my quiet apartment watching the rain streak across the window pane while I enjoy a glass of fine wine in total peace. There are no more frantic phone calls, no more insults about my simple lifestyle, and no more predatory family members trying to drain my resources. I have finally removed the toxic tumor that was poisoning my life, and for the first time in years I can breathe without feeling the weight of their expectations or their betrayals. Before we conclude today's story, it is important to reflect on the deeper message behind Valerie's painful journey. Do not overlook the warning signs displayed by Tabitha, as her downfall serves as a grim reminder of the high price of a fake lifestyle. This story highlights a profound truth: when parents indulge a child's narcissism and shield them from the consequences of their actions, they aren't showing love, they are creating a monster. Tabitha's transformation into a predator was fueled by a home environment where flashy lies were valued more than honest labor. The obsession with appearing successful without actually being successful is a poison that eventually destroys everyone it touches, as seen by the tragic loss of the family home. Valerie's decision to walk away might seem cold to some, but it was a necessary act of self-preservation against people who refused to see the truth until it was too late. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end of this long and emotional journey. I truly appreciate your support and the time you spend here listening to these stories that reflect the complexities of modern life. I would love to hear your thoughts on this situation. Do you think Valerie was right to cut off her parents entirely? Or should she have helped them since they were also victims of Tabitha's lies? If you were in her shoes, would you have waited for the party to expose the truth? Or would you have handled it privately? Please share your opinions and personal stories in the comments below, as your perspective